Okay, good morning to everybody and welcome back. Welcome to the second day of our SCIC-Universities Conference. Remember that this is the number 23 of our conferences. I hope that yesterday you had a pleasant evening, that you had the opportunity to meet friends, to talk about common worries and opportunities. Before starting with our panel, I have three small things to share with you. First of all, somebody asked me, what is this present that you gave yesterday? You know, this small thing. Well, I have read the instructions. It's a tracker, it's un localizador. So it's like that. If you put it next to your keys, if you put it in your car, if you put it somewhere, you have to upload an app in your smartphone, and then you will know where this small device is. So it's very important to find people. And we have put in there the hashtag of the SCIC KCI in order for you to remember that you have always to go to the KCI. Okay, so this is the first thing. Second thing, yesterday I forgot, and talking about hashtags and Twitter, and I forgot to tell you that the hashtag for the conference is SCIC23, but I know that most of you have already discovered, because yesterday was really, Twitter was burning about our conference, and I don't know if we were world trending topic, but at least my smartphone, which is very smart, kept on saying to me, trending topic for you, SCIC23. So I was very happy about that. And third thing, and this will be the perfect excuse for me to introduce our panel, the visual identity of the conference. You have seen it. I mean, we have this. I love it very much. We are very proud of that. We had some ideas about it. We talked with our designer, Leonid Gutesa, who is somewhere around here today. And he did a fantastic work. He proposed us this. And it's true, Florica told us yesterday, at the beginning we were like, oh my God, this is risky, this is not. So I thought that the best thing to do will be to show it to people, just to get the reactions. So I showed it to some people of my age, let's say. At the beginning, everybody said, but this is a robot. And you remember, Leszek, we were together, and oh, this is a robot. And I was like, oh my God. But then I went and I saw our stagiaires, our trainees. We have Marion and Philip with us. They are there helping us in the organization of the conference. I show it to them, and they said, there are 20-something, 23, 24. And they said, no, but this is a superhero. It's like a Spider-Man. And I said, yes, exactly. This is what we want. We want to create the super interpreter. We want to create the augmented interpreter. So that's why we have organized today a panel to see how we can work towards the augmented interpreter. So I give the floor now to Ramūnas Cesonis. He is the head of the Lithuanian booth representing Director A. And I'm sure he will be a fantastic moderator, and he will introduce our guests and our colleagues.
No pressure, Javier.
No pressure.
Good morning, everyone. New technologies is like new gold rush that we're all witnessing in one way or another. It brings innovation, which is both exciting and disruptive. How does it affect the interpreting community? And are we ready for this new transformation? The European Commission has proposed a record 100 billion euro for research and development in the new multi-annual financial framework under Horizon Europe program, and 9.2 billion euro for Digital Europe. DG SCIC has been exploring new opportunities in the Special Task Force on New Technologies and Digitalization since June 2017, as Florica has presented yesterday in great detail. A number of specific projects have now been rolled out in our service, such as automated assignment of interpreters to meetings, the digital toolbox for meeting preparation and terminology management, automated transcripts of meetings for meeting delegates using speech-to-text technologies. We're also involved in drafting the standards for new technologies, such as web-based simultaneous interpretation platforms, So this morning we will take a broad look at both the trends and the specific examples on how these new technologies are changing our landscape and creating a new augmented interpreter with the help of our knowledgeable panelists. A very warm welcome to you all. We will start with the two presentations from the academic world with Alphonse Juan from Valencia and Andrzej Boyer from Prague, after which we'll have our first Q&A session. Next, our guest from the field will share the specific experiences and insights. These are Maria Cristina de Preter from DGT, Antoinette Legrand from DG SCIC, Anna Grzybowska from European Parliament, and Lode Deret from DG SCIC. Following these four contributions, we'll have a second Q&A session that will seamlessly take us to our deserved coffee break. We do not have much time, thus, if need be, I'll have to put on a hat of a referee and give you a little sign of appreciation and the signal that we need to move on to the next panelist, because we all want this session to be interactive and to give a lot of time for our audience to give questions. So without further ado, let me introduce our first panelist. Alphonse Juan is a full professor of computer science at the Polytechnic University of Valencia. He has participated in more than 30 research projects, mostly in the areas of machine learning, human language technologies, including speech recognition and machine translation, and the application to real-life tasks. Since 2014, Alphonse leads the Machine Learning and Language Processing Research Group. It is my pleasure to give the floor to Alphonse now to kickstart our panel discussion.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ramonas. Thank you to Javier. And thank you to the organization for this magnificent event and the speakers for giving us this opportunity. I hope I can make a contribution from our modest experience in this area so we can help meet the objectives of this event. And as Ramonas has been saying, I've got Gonçalo, my colleague, with us over there. There he is. And we represent a small group of researchers in a Spanish public university in Valencia. In recent years, we have in particular been interested in the use of technologies for human language applied to the world of education. And basically, this has taken the form of three projects financed by the European Union: Translectures, EMMA, and at present, SCIC. Our objective in these projects has been to provide multilingual subtitling to open education resources in our and other European universities, with two major objectives: to make it easier to have access to these educational resources when they are open, in particular for people with disabilities, hearing in particular, and also to overcome language barriers and to make it easier to exchange education resources throughout Europe by being able to understand a variety of languages. These European projects, therefore, are what we've been concentrating on mainly in our work. They have been fairly effective. So one of our main objectives has been to try to apply this to the real world and to transfer this technology to the real world. And in pursuing this objective, the technology has already been transferred, is already being used in our own university, that is the Polytechnic University of Valencia, the Joseph Stefan Institute in Ljubljana, GSI, Carlos III University Madrid, Lisbon University, Potsdam University, and also some businesses that are interested in technology. And within our university, we have two services, basically, Polytrans and Polysubs, which I will present to you later. So the idea is this. We produce educational videos, as you see them here. We don't have enough time to allow me to show you any of them, but we've got a series of educational videos which last for 10 minutes, where we explain to our students a number of different subjects, some of them technical. The teachers use these videos, which we have in a repository. They're in Spanish, and they can be accessed in different languages by our students. The official languages are Spanish and Valencian, but we also produce in English, French, German, and it's very expensive to generate these education resources in a number of languages. So our objective has been to take the original and then provide subtitles in the different languages. In our case, it wasn't realistic to do this manually. So that's one of my videos on probabilistic reasoning, which was in Spanish, English, and Valencian. This diagram, without going into too much detail, reflects the three basic cases of use which we have. On the left panel, you have a typical case where you have a lecturer recording an educational resource, and that educational resource via the Polytrans service automatically has subtitles in a variety of languages generated for it. And then you have automatic subtitling of the resource, and it's stored. And the diagram to the right, what we can see is typical users, where students, that's a typical user of this, watch the educational resources with the subtitles they want in different languages. On their players, because they are subtitled in a variety of languages. And then we have a panel in the middle which shows you a case where the subtitles are correct, or whether there might be errors, because automatic systems can make errors, and the students themselves help correct the subtitles, especially the more serious mistakes. And in that way we have subtitles available in the different languages for our educational resources. We know that our university is using this a lot of success. We've been doing it since 2014 with all the videos we've been producing. And our students are from all over Europe, thanks to the Erasmus program. They're attracted to Valencia University, and they can use these resources in their own languages. Now, what's happened recently? Our university wanted to extend this service, Polytrans and Polysubs. They wanted to extend this service for live, real-time subtitling. What people wanted us to do was to create a system like we use for the previously recorded education resources, which would work in real time immediately. And in the main lecture halls, the system has been installed. So when we have an important lecturer coming from another university, for example, who wants to speak in English, we can provide automatic subtitles for our students so that they can follow. Now this, I don't know if you can see this below. That's one of the biggest lecture halls we have. And on the side screens, you have the subtitles projected automatically. And we also have a mobile app, which is very simple, where students can select the language and connect to the subtitling service and see what is being produced. Now, these systems have made a lot of progress in recent years in terms of text, and the quality is relatively acceptable. Now, along this line, about a year ago, we were invited by the European Parliament to try out a concept to see how this could be applied in a context of the European Parliament. We have a demo which we'd like to show you now, so you can have an idea as to how this would work. It's the conceptual stage of this time. There's two videos. You have some speeches made in different languages by MEPs, and as we see, a system which identifies the language of the MEP, which is relatively simple, and then transcribes it in real time. So I just want to show you that moving on from our experience in the world of higher education, for relatively simple tasks where the quality of the task is not critical, where there's not too much background noise, or the quality of the sound is good, it's viable to use technology which provides an acceptable result. It's perhaps difficult for me to say to the audience, but the interpreters in the European Parliament say it's a very complex process, and I'm fully aware of that. But these technologies are a long way off what human interpreters do, and you have to recognize the context in which human interpreters work. But what I'm saying is that these technologies are here, they are used in universities, and they've been very useful in the context in which using your choice between doing nothing at all or doing this. And for certain very simple tasks, it can be useful. What next? Perhaps we could just run the video for a while.
Producción de los biocarburantes que tiene sobre los bosques, las zonas protegidas, la producción agraria. Pero la Comisión se ha precipitado a la hora de legislar. No disponemos de datos concluyentes porque las cifras que provienen de terceros países que tienen unas estructuras políticas y administrativas muy deficientes, no son fiables. Faltan datos científicos también para aplicar el factor ILUC de una forma fiable, y así no conseguiremos jamás que se sigan aumentando las inversiones en biocarburantes. La producción de biocarburantes ya tiene suficientes controles. Gracias a los
Bueno, pues muchas gracias.
So, now you've seen it. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Alphonse, for providing these specific examples and insights from Valencia University on the way the new technologies can be applied in higher education and beyond, allowing wider participation and disseminating knowledge. Let us move on now to the Central Europe, where Charles University has been working on a number of big academic initiatives and tests. Andrzej Bojar is an associate professor working at an institute of formal and applied linguistics. He has been primarily active in the field of machine translation. He is the main author of the hybrid system called Chimera, which at some point outperformed all competing systems, such as Google Translate, in the area of translation from English into Czech language. In recent years, Andrzej has fully moved to neural machine translation field, and his main goal now is to study the representations learned by the deep learning models. Andrzej will now explain very well what it's all about. Please, Andrzej.
Thank you for the introduction. As said, my name is Ondřej Bojar, and I'm from Charles University in Prague. And I've labeled my talk Prospects and Perils of Automatic Interpreting. I hope that the talk won't be too controversial, but we are here to have the discussions anyway. So does this work? Yeah. Let me just quickly give labels to the technologies that we are working on. When I say automatic interpreting, I mean the combination of automatic speech recognition, so ASR, and machine translation, MT. And together we call this whole thing spoken language translation. And we end with the text. So that's the scope of my interest. So I'm not really interested in speech synthesis. This is the progress over the years of quality of speech recognition from the 80s till 2009. What you maybe see on the slides is the little gray or thin gray line around 4%. That's word error rate, the number of words that have to be changed. The area between 2 or 4% of word error rate is where humans perform. If you give them the speech and they are expected to transcribe that. And as you see, the human level performance on this historical plot was reached only in the 80s. And I'm sure that was for very specific tasks such as keyword recognition. And then for a long period of time, every researcher was only stuck around the 10% of word error rate. Then deep learning came. So this is a more recent plot. This plots the performance on one particular corpus. So this is all comparable results. And from 2011 up to 2017, the word error rate has dramatically dropped. And the human level performance on this test is set at 6% of word error rate. And in 2017, that level was partly reached. So this is the ASR. I'm mainly working on machine translation. So I do not have the full background knowledge of these results. I have the full background knowledge of machine translation. That's the second step in our pipeline. My question was whether machine translation is surpassing humans after all the improvements thanks to the deep learning stuff. Evaluating machine translation is much more complicated than evaluating speech recognition because there are many possible translations. And you have to essentially validate whether the machine has chosen an acceptable translation or not. So this is the bilingual setup that we use for the evaluation. So mostly the evaluation in the past years was run monolingually. You were showing only the reference translation and the candidate translation by the machine translation system, and human assessors were telling us whether the sentences have the same meaning. Last year, we kind of assumed that for English to Czech, the quality could be similar to the human performance, so we did this evaluation bilingually. We were showing the source English, and we were showing the Czech translation. You see one such annotation screen on the slides. And we were able in this setup to mix in also the reference translation among the candidate translations. So in this setup, humans and machines have the same conditions, it seems. Here is the results. By the way, Google Translate is labeled online B here, and they ended up 4th in this news translation. Then better were Edinburgh team and also human translators. And interestingly, significantly better, according to this evaluation, our system based on the transformer architecture surpassed humans. So there is a big caveat to this result. Humans have translated the whole documents, but machine translation was only running segment by segment. And this evaluation, this screen that you have seen, also runs only segment by segment. So I find it very likely that a sentence would be worded slightly differently if it appears in some particular document context. And since the evaluators, as well as the machine translation system, did not see the context, but the human translation had the context at hand, it is possible that the context-wise correct translation does not sound natural when evaluated alone. So the machine had an advantage here in the evaluation. So that's why I'm really like not saying that we have surpassed the humans at all yet. But it's slowly coming. So this is our starting point. We have just started a European research and innovation project. It's called ELITER, European Live Translator. And aside from us, the coordinator at Charles University, we have Edinburgh and Karlsruhe as the research partners, and then an integrated partner per voice and a user partner AlphaView, which is a web meeting platform. And the main, we also have another affiliated user partner, and that's the Supreme Audit of the Czech Republic, Supreme Audit Office. And the main event of this research project will happen actually in the middle of the project next year. There is the EuroSci Congress, and we are supposed to be interpreting at that Congress. So there are several goals to the project. One of them is the highly multilingual machine and speech, highly multilingual machine translation, so text translation and speech translation. We also know that we need to improve the document level quality of machine translation. And we have a third goal, which is the automatic minuting, automatic creation of summaries of meetings. So here is just a slide which illustrates what automatic minuting is. That's one more technology. And this is only the idea. This is still at the concept stage. I don't expect any really working systems at the end of the project, but we should have a prototype that somehow demonstrate the capabilities of that. If you have an agenda, such as a hierarchical set of topics, and then you have the meeting running, maybe multilingual meeting, and you get the transcript already unified to a single target language, you then want items from the transcript to populate the agendas to get the minutes. So this is the minuting research. ELITER is highly multilingual. We are primarily focusing on English and German, and for spoken language translation, we are also highly focusing on Czech. But we are covering other important European languages, and for the spoken language translation, we should be actually aiming at all European languages in the text, and the SAO, the Supreme Audit Office for the Congress, actually needs up to 43 languages in total. So this is additional 19 EuroSci languages. The quality will obviously differ, but this is our goals. So when we just started, I wanted to do a reality check. So that's why 2 weeks ago we put ourselves into a pre-dry run. We took part in a fair of student companies. It's business schools, high school level students, and they are presenting their mock companies as if they were selling products, talking to customers, and so on. So what we were supposed to do, this is myself and the online system running at that point, we were supposed to be invisible and correctly subtitling and translating what you have said. This is the setup. If you can reach some English and if you can read some Czech, then you will see. So this is one of the slides where it worked. Frankly speaking, it failed most of the time. Here is our scores on these high school students. All of them were Europeans, so English was not, or like Central Europeans mainly. Well, there were also Spanish students and so on, but no UK students. So English was not their mother tongue in any of the cases, and the noise conditions were very bad. So the word error rate was nowhere near to 10% and nowhere near to human performance of 4%. It was with the KIT, so with our system, it was around 40%, and the Google online system had the word error rate around the average would be 89 or so word error rate, so most of the words totally wrong. And also it has given up in many cases, so that's why you have two plots here. One of the plots is if you say that if it has given up, it will get a score of 100, so the worst possible score. And if it has not given up, the left-hand plot shows it like only on the test where it did something, but it still didn't do something useful. So I would like now to, if we can make the slide a little smaller, have the slides shown and play the sound. Yes, the sound. Not the video, so that is the segment. Yeah, whichever.
We're going to.
Hi, 15th, and you?
22nd.
Would you mind if I take off my shoes? Those highs heels are killing me.
Of course, I don't mind it.
Thank you.
Why do you wear those high heels? If you would wear some sneakers. I know one really good store that deals with the sale of free-time footwear.
Oh, really?
Yes, actually I work for them. Its name is Kaspervolk Ltd, and we offer many different shoes from different brands such as Nike, Adidas for each age and gender.
Do you offer some unique shoes?
Yeah.
And we can look at the transcript. So you see that these transcripts were done by the students themselves with listening to their own speech. This was the part when the girl was saying, why, or when the boy was saying, why do you wear those high heels? If you would wear some sneakers, I think he himself actually made a mistake when transcribing that. I think the punctuation should be done differently. And then he goes on. So you have the golden transcript on the left in the left-hand column, and then you have the three outputs from the system that we tried, and you see errors of many kinds. The footwear translating as food, and so on. And the sound example that you have listened to, that has illustrated the difference in sound quality. So it was noisy background. I would say that millimeters make a difference. So if depending on the position of the mic, you might get the right amplitude of the sound. And if it's not the right range of amplitude, the ASR systems are bound to fail and so on. So mostly it failed, but we had one success, and I would like to play the video now. And that's the Tomáš Sedláček lecture snippet. And you will see the speaker.
I don't have to pay tariffs. I don't have to go through legislation to comply with German bureaucracy. My currency can't
now. But if you had the chance to see the video at a larger font, you would see that it recognized the word bureaucracy. It made almost complete sentences in most of the cases. It was probably the good pronunciation of the speaker. He has lived in the States for quite some time, and also the sound conditions and all the technical conditions were just fortunate for that case. So here is a list of challenges that we are facing. As I already mentioned, the sound is totally critical. The microphone, the choice of the microphone, the background, and then speaker specifics, the dialects, then the ASR technology itself that relies on training data, and you really need training data, and more of training data. There is jargon, there is named entities. I didn't include a picture that I took yesterday on the street, but some of the street names here in Brussels are actually translated. So I was very confused that names are supposed to be translated, but that does happen, and you have to know when to do it and when not. Then there is abbreviations that can very easily be misrecognized, and domain-specific terms. Then spoken language translation comes. So I'm familiar with all the problems that machine translation has: the ambiguity, the lack of context, the rare words, and the multilinguality that we are trying to cover. But on top of that, we have to deal with missing segmentation and missing punctuation. And from the user point of view, also the very important trade-off is the latency. So do we want to translate sooner, be more in synchronization with the original speaker, or do we want to translate later with more context and thus deliver better translation and ASR quality? And the delivery itself is also a technical challenge. So in the previous presentation, there was a Wi-Fi application for a mobile phone that did this thing, but Wi-Fi is failing in crowded areas. So it's not sure how to deliver the translations to the speaker. And technically, people cannot follow the slides and look at the site, look at the subtitles on the handheld device. So there is also perception issues. And the main challenge that we have is actually managing expectations. So to support this, I'm showing you part of a Guardian article from 2007, October 2007. Facebook translated "good morning" into "attack them," leading to arrest. So the man posted some Arabic word, and it correctly translates into "good morning," but Facebook's machine translation translated it as "hard them" or "attack them" in Hebrew. And the police officers arrested the man that day later and questioned him for several hours. So that's the picture of the man and the post. The main message comes a few sentences later. At no point before this arrest did any Arabic-speaking officer read the actual post. So that's the message. To summarize, ASR and machine translation do surpass humans, but only in very specific settings so far. And some robustness is achievable through very large training data. I haven't touched the details, but in MT, this is what we have done for the Czech system outperforming humans. For ASR, the input acquisition is absolutely critical, and tiny details can totally kill the technology, and that can happen at any point during the live session for various reasons. For machine translation, the context will be essential, and more so in speech, because so far we are getting isolated actually sentence fragments, and translating sentence fragments is bound to introduce another set of errors. So document level is the topic of this year's machine translation evaluation. So SLT, spoken language translation, won't put good interpreters out of business anytime soon, but it will complement them to cover many more sessions and many more languages. And I would like to point out that the spoken language translation also creates new professions. So it could be post-editors or re-speakers. These are monolingual workers who are now needed. So if you want to get the best possible performance and you cannot afford for the particular session a proper interpreter, what you can do is just hire a re-speaker, and the re-speaker will isolate the sound issues. He will only repeat what he has just listened to in the same language, and the ASR technology would be adapted to this particular re-speaker and then perform much better. So humans can make a big difference by sitting at one of the ends of the pipeline. So I would like to close with a request or wish for data. I've mentioned the automatic minuting application. So in order to test this concept out, to have something workable, we really need data. So if you are in any organization that runs meetings and records them and has agendas and minutes, please think if you would be able to share this data with us. We have the procedure, the consents that you would obviously have to give, and your participants of the meetings would have to give. But after these procedures, the data would be just great to test the technology out. We need agendas, we need minutes, and any supplementary files, and obviously we need the audio or the transcript. So please contact us if you can provide any data for this. So that's it. Thank you for your time, and I'm ready for questions later in the discussion.
Thank you, Andrzej, for another insightful presentation from the academic world and for providing the taste of what lies ahead. Mastering languages for artificial intelligence is really an uphill struggle, though we do have some examples of surpassing humans in the area of translation. But it is still really a very, very long travel until languages can be mastered, if at all. We'll be definitely looking forward, willingly or not willingly, to the results of the Supreme Audit Institution project. And now I think it's a good time to have a little Q&A session for some 10 minutes before we all forget this, if we can forget this at all. So you are welcome to give questions or contribute to the discussion after the first two presentations, please. Who would like to start? Okay, while we're waiting for reactions from the audience, I would like to make a first go at both panelists. The question is obviously an elephant in the room. Having this hands-on experience in the language lab, what is your personal view as to the prospect of replacing the interpreter by the machines in any midterm future or later?
So I can start. I'm very optimistic, but I would just replace the word replacing with the word complementing or extending the number of meetings that can be covered. So for important meetings, I would not expect that humans would be replaced and that the machine would be chosen within the lifetime of the Eliter project, for example. But I see many meetings which cannot afford full interpreting service. And many participants of those meetings that, for example, struggle even with the 6 official languages of the session. So for those, the machine translation technology can expand this to all the European languages, all the Euro-style languages. So this is something which I see happening these days already.
Yes, I agree with my colleague. I take this opportunity also to add a comment on our experience. For us, it was, let's say, we could say that we managed to get accurate subtitles for these recordings, educational recordings at a studio, but we are still struggling to get good results for live classes. So we would like to have it for live classes. And then it's difficult because the quality of the audio is different. We have multi microphones, we have noise, we have many people speaking. I mean, the room has its own difficulties. So in that case, I think it fits with the same idea. It's an application area in which we can only hope to have automatic systems delivering something that can be useful for somebody who don't understand what, I mean, the language from the speaker, and that's all.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? Yes, please, Alexander.
So thank you very much. It was really very interesting. I want to ask something, Andrea. What you presented is somehow subtitling and transcript, okay? Have you tried it also with voice? So that let's say that the translation, the machine translation, the speech technology is also used not with subtitles, but expressed in voice, that people can hear something, to go to the discussion of replacing the human interpreter. And then the second question is, do you have anything about... Sorry. Did you try at all the... do you have anything about the experience of the customer, let's say? Because from what I understand here, the transcript was done by the speakers themselves. Okay, so do you have anything about the experience of the customer now, or are you planning to do something about that?
So the first question was producing speech, and I mentioned in the presentation that we are not aiming at producing speech at the moment. I think I know what you are aiming at. Like robotic speech is very hard to listen to for an extended period of time. I believe that this is also changing with neural networks, but I have not worked in that area at all, so I don't know myself. And without listening to an automated speech synthesis for 2 hours, I would not be able to make an opinion. I think it's getting better. So the samples that I have randomly heard sound much better than they used to be 3 years ago. But still, that's a very important part as well. And the second question was the customer content, how happy the customers are with this. So here, in this particular fair, there was a fair of high school students. We asked them to do the transcripts, both to help them to improve their presentation skills, because by listening to your own speech, you can surely learn something useful. And we needed the gold transcripts, so they created the transcripts in order to allow for the evaluation to be done. And actually, we were giving out prizes for those who reached the best word error rate, so whose speech was best recognized by the system. So at the beginning, it looked that we will have to give the prizes at random because our our speech recognition systems were failing. But in the offline mode, we were actually able to make some reasonable estimates of this. So that's our customers so far. But we are not alone in the market. This Elite project builds upon the years of experience from other projects. So I know the problems and limitations of the machine translation technology, and Karlsruhe and Edinburgh as well are very experienced in the speech recognition. There was a series of research projects in machine translation beforehand that we took part, series of speech recognition projects that they took part. The University of Valencia also was in some of those. So in the known settings such as lectures, then you can get reasonable performance already these days. So yes, they are surely happy customers, but that's for control condition, especially in terms of the content spoken and the recording setting for the sound.
There was a woman behind. Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Maya DeWitt. I'm representing AIC here, but also the AIC Sign Language Network. Thank you for the interesting presentations. I have a specific question for Professor Kisar, sorry for pronouncing your name incorrectly. So about the subtitling, I was wondering, you were mentioning specifically persons who are deaf or students who are deaf or hard of hearing who have found that very useful, the subtitling. Do you have any data on it? Like how successful has it been? How many have been using it successfully? I think it's a very needed service. I know here in the European Commission, we often work where we are sign language interpreters working in any session. Often there is also live subtitling present. So we have a human there who actually does live subtitling, or we call it then speech-to-text interpretation or translation. And I do think there, personally, in my experience, but this is not based on any empirical data, but on my almost 30 years of experience, I do see a difference in live subtitling of someone who's highly qualified against that one that is not. Machine translation or subtitling. So I'm wondering, do you have any data or research?
No, sorry. The data we have already collected, it's more about, it's not a specific to, the impaired students using this technology. It's more about, let's say, an increase of enrollment in virtual classes, or choosing subtitles in a language different from the original language. But we do not have a specific number for the impaired people using subtitles. What we know on average is that from the whole set of views of our resources, 1.5% of them switch on the subtitles. So let's say it's an indication, maybe.
Thank you. We have time for one last question in this session, please.
Thank you. I'm Claire Donovan from AZIT. My question is for all of us, really, but for the speakers. Given that robotic voice quality is improving, everyone says that, and that all of these other technologies, ASR and machine translation, also improving, we can expect to have an automatic interpretation service that will be in some ways acceptable, subject to certain conditions. So the question is, what qualities would a human interpreter have to bring that would enable the human interpretation to compete with machine interpretation?
Well, as I said, I'm let's say focused on my application, an educational context, and what I see is that for tasks in which we cannot access to human interpretation, let's say transcript, then it might be acceptable to have such a system if the conditions are, let's say, optimal for the machines. We label all the subtitles that have been automatically produced as automatically produced, just as a warning. Okay, take this with care. This has been automatically produced, so it's not, let's say, you can expect let's say big mistakes there or something that is not. But it's only limited, I would say, to the cases in which we do not expect high quality, or the task is critical, or. Okay.
So to answer your question, I think that where machines will not work at all would be any field translation, so to say. So if you go out with a client, there is no way that the sound conditions would be suitable for that. So that is something. Then the world knowledge, that's what humans have and the machines don't have, and they won't have it until they are robots walking with us in the streets and banging in the same, like falling in the same pit, holes in the streets and so on. But for most situations, you may go without word knowledge. And one thing that probably would occur to many of you would be like the knowledge, the expertise in the area about which the speech is given. And here I'm the most concerned, and I think that actually this is something where humans will lose very soon. So I have not had that in my slides because that's still an ongoing research. But we have preliminary experiments that indicate that the machine translation is more adequate than human translation, and that's because well, humans tend to be sloppy at times, so they can forget tiny details, and the machine, if it's fast enough, then it will be fast enough and it will include all the words. It will not simplify things. So the adequacy and the domain knowledge is something which the machines can now grasp better if they are provided with sufficient data, and that is happening in many areas. So I would not bet on the expertise of humans, but I would bet on their listening conditions and robustness in performance.
Thank you. After this answer, I think it's a perfect time now to move on to other panelists who are from the field, who are applying these technologies in real life, so they can share their real experiences and insights as to how they see these technologies and whether they are useful and whether they can indeed be better than humans at some point. We'll give you the time to give additional questions, as I mentioned. After all the panelists make their presentations, they will each have around 5 minutes. And we'll start with Cristina Maria de Preter from the Director General for Translation at the European Commission. Cristina joined the GGT back in 1982, where she performed various roles, including that of the head of unit and now the head of the Portuguese language department. Since 2017, Cristina has also been acting director of the Directorate B, responsible for 7 language departments. We know that the developments at a translator's workplace can in a way be regarded as heralds of what we can expect in the interpretation world. So what do you see and feel among your ranks, Cristina?
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I will speak French, so merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the floor when Andres was being a bit provocative, saying that when it comes to translation and experience of specific subjects, machine translation can outperform human translation. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to react to that. But before I do, we've heard about a lot of technologies, but I would like to thank SCIC for the invitation to participate in this panel. I have to say that DG Interpretation, DG Translation in the Commission are 2 sister Directorate Generals that guarantee multilingualism in the institutions. And no later than yesterday, I know I don't have much time, but here indeed yesterday on the 2nd floor we had the Young Translators Competition prize giving, and we sort of had a firework display of multilingualism thanks to you. The interpretation was there for all the languages, and it was quite moving actually to see how it can work. So it's something of a marvel, and that's the first time I heard my Director General speaking Lithuanian, and I was impressed. So we're 2 sister DGs, interpretation, translation, but we're very different in regards to the service we provide and regards to the kind of technologies we use. But I'm rather struck about automatic translation. It increasingly plays an important role also in the context of interpreting. Now, I work and have been working for 30 years in DG translation, and over time I've seen rapid changes in working methods. You won't believe me, but when I started, there wasn't a single computer in the service. And now in DGT, we are introducing automatic translation for certain things with results which I would say are stupefying. I'd rather answer questions myself later, but by way of introduction, let me tell you about DG Translation is very proud to have created its own system of machine translation based on millions of segments of translation accumulated since 1957. So we have a huge treasure of linguistic resources that we have used to build our own system, MTEC, before and now integrated into a project managed by CNET. E-translation is what it's called now, and it is more targeted on new technologies of a neuronal kind, neuronal machine translation. The reason why we set up the system was first of all confidentiality. I know people use Google, and Google is the owner of data communicated to it, so there was an issue, a real issue there of confidentiality of our documents, but also because the output of machine translation is better when you concentrate on a certain kind of document. So we in DGT are in the area of institutional translation, which has its own rules. We work a lot on legal texts, so the output you get on a draft regulation, draft directive from Google is much worse than our own system. But if we ourselves were to translate a press release or a speech of a commissioner, maybe there, Google might be better. I don't know, we're not allowed to use it in the commission. But if one were to run an experiment, possibly the result there might be better. It's important to know that we have results with machine translation which are a function of a kind of document and a kind of document which has fed into the data bank in the machine translation. That's particularly important, what you feed into the machines. That's why DGT now is wagering a lot, not just on machines and what's been put in the machines over the years, but also, and Andre has said this, and this is important, the question of data and the quality of data you're feeding into the system is very important. It's essential. So DGT has now got involved in a decisive way in data analysis to manage our own linguistic treasure of thesaurus. We have to be very careful what we put into the machines to begin, the quality of the starting data. But is it of interest to us to use just our own data? Or might it be interesting for us to take data from elsewhere, for example, from national administrations, so as to complete our shared thesaurus on the basis of which the machine translation works? Got a bit more technical there, but I'd rather actually talk to you about the emotional aspect. Now, when people talk about technology, I'm always rather impressed to hear things I don't fully understand, but my feeling is that this new technology is there and we can't ignore it. Ignoring what is going on in the world is not an option, but I know it's not easy. And what I want to talk to you rather about here is the way in which this can be managed in personal terms, these major changes which are happening to our professions. The profile of translation is changing constantly. We're in touch also with universities how we can prepare the next generations of translators for the future. Neither myself, Philippe, or Frederica know exactly what the future holds. So the management, senior management, cannot really give the response, but it can prepare, and that's what DGT is doing now, prepare translators for this world which is changing faster and faster. So it's difficult to make these adaptations. I have to stop, okay. Anyway, you can put questions to me later. I have to say that machine translation has been around for over 25 years. It's nothing new. Some pioneers have been pushing this, and it's a question of passion. In each service, you have a number of people, of pioneers, that are ahead of the others, opening the way. And then afterwards, you have people like you and me who have more difficulty because we studied at a certain time. We see things have changed since. We're not sure what our place is in the future. Will machines support our profession, or replace our profession? And I think you have to take ownership of the procedures. It's not possible. It's not an option to ignore things. So we have to take ownership of the process and take best advantage of what new technology can offer. To give you an example, in DGT, what we've been doing is that we have set up in each language department, as you know, we divided into a number of departments, each of which has its own characteristic. And it's very difficult, actually, to manage in organizational terms. It creates quite a lot of headaches. The output of machine translation is not the same for all language pairs. So we have to manage this major asymmetry in the service. That's a major challenge. What we've also been doing is that we have decided that everybody has to participate. The whole service has to work together to deal with these changes. The language technology coordinator is a new role that's been created. It means in a very decentralized way, you have somebody who is acting, if you like, the pioneer for a certain language, who's helping colleagues and who is centralizing the training aspects. We've compiled an inventory of all the staff's competences. It's not something that we usually practice to get involved in this kind of exercise, but colleagues have taken on this board. They've understood that it's in their own interest to know what I know. You don't really know what you don't know. And that has been an exercise to open up people's horizons and in a very targeted way to provide for training which was lacking and to try together to meet these major challenges. I almost got the yellow card there, but I'm ready to answer any questions you might have, and I'm happy to tell you about our experience.
Thank you, Christina. As I said, this is also a card of big appreciation. So,
okay, thank you.
So thank you very much for sharing with us the story of fear and passion. Obviously, in the area of translation, the breakthrough is already there, and as you said, we cannot ignore it. It is now time to turn to our next panelist, who is an interpreter and my good colleague from DG SCIC, Antoinette Legrand. Antoinette started off as a translator for Belgian institutions, including the Parliament, and later became staff at DG SCIC in 2008. She works in the French booth and interprets from 4 languages. Here she also continues her pedagogical activities, as she used to be a university teacher in her previous life. Antoinette has been representing interpreters at the Task Force on New Technologies. Thus, she is closely following all the modernization processes at our institution. So, Antoinette, what do machines mean to you as an interpreter?
Je vais parler français aussi.
I'm also going to speak French. Long live multilingualism, I say. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm taking the floor this morning to give you my feeling as an interpreter in the field about how our profession is changing. And it's also, as an ordinary interpreter, that I participate, and I have been participating, as Ramonas was saying, for the past 2 years in the SCIC task force on digital transformation. And I must admit that over time, gradually, my opinions have changed. However, I am still convinced of one thing. New technologies are here to stay. That's true. However, the human interpreter will not be replaced anytime soon. And besides, if I really thought that we were digging the interpreting profession's grave slowly, I would not continue to go on pedagogical assistance to your universities. And that really is a question, a matter of intellectual integrity. So why do I continue to believe in this then? Well, when I'm talking to an audience like yours, SCIC-Universities, I don't think I need to explain why language is so complex, why we don't just string words together like beads on a necklace, for example. You know, like I do, that there are a huge number of elements hiding behind words. Your intention, therefore feelings, logic, that's to say arguments. And then there are cultural references, in-jokes on football, for example, irony, cynicism regarding the bureaucrats in Brussels. And then there are also slips of the tongue that are often so revealing. And then there's what's not said. Silences. They often tell us quite a lot, and also are worthy of being interpreted. And I'm sure you're also thinking, like I do, about non-verbal communication, facial expressions, hand gestures, raised eyebrows, voice, intonation. Voices can falter from emotion or from rage. All of these elements of language are exquisitely human, like me and you. And if my microphone will stay on, I'll carry on. These elements also make communication a living thing and make it very relevant. So for all of these reasons, I'm still so bold as to believe that the human interpreter is not an endangered species. And I remain convinced that this morning, my colleagues over there in the booth will interpret my words more faithfully than a machine could ever do. Obviously, you will say, I must say rather, that I'm basing my opinions on the state of the art as it's been presented to me, and that, of course, science will continue to move forward. Of course, that's true. However, I've been hearing that interpreters are a dying breed for the past 20 years, and yet interpreters are still here. And that's perhaps because human beings can offer added value. And for as long as a robot will be unable to not only translate my words, but also actually grasp what's behind those words, and that's to say, a robot able to think like me, while that doesn't happen, I would say it'd be 1-0 to the humans. Now, of course, whilst it's true that humans are a bit more sensitive to feelings than machines, that means that they're also not completely infallible. So, if they're confronted with a fish name or a series of figures, then yes, perhaps the algorithm will do a better job. And in those cases, it would be 1-0 to the robot, admittedly. But once again, what are meetings? Meetings are not just a catalogue of fish names. It's not just reciting the phone book. A meeting is an exchange amongst people that quite often are leading difficult, complicated negotiations. And just let's think about the Brexit negotiations. And when things get tense, there might be 1,000 reasons for that. And I think it's rarely for a purely terminological reason that this might happen. It might be linked to the speed, it might be linked to accent, or it might just be because we're entering into the most delicate phase of the negotiations. And that's where a human interpreter will start to tread on eggshells. They will weigh up every word on the basis of the context. They will put themselves in the speaker's shoes and also in their customer's shoes. And it's a little bit schizophrenic. But in those cases, you might fear that a machine might well be a bull in a china shop. Having said that, though, it would be crazy for us to reject out of hand all of the opportunities that new technologies can offer us. Our meetings are very varied and often quite technical, and we need to be prepared. And that is where human interpreters need backup. Artificial intelligence could certainly facilitate many things, reading of documents, the extraction of terminology, and any kind of upstream preparation for the meeting. That's the type of work that we're often required to do after 8 p.m. when our other job starts, if you like. That's the time when I personally would love to be able to have a second brain that's already ready and prepared for my meeting the following day. But that's where I really see the added value from new technologies. Tools can help us to save time and also be more efficient, but I really can't see them replacing us altogether. In terms of letting artificial intelligence into the booth, there I have to say I have mixed feelings. Within SCIC, as you've already heard, we're starting to look at an idea of a dashboard. That would be a screen where you would see figures, names, complicated terms flashing up. Basically, this console would be the ideal colleague. That's to say, somebody that helps us out, somebody that would never be out of the booth, but somebody that's not quite in your face either. They would remain quite discreet. At any rate, we have to avoid having technologies that would distract us more than helping us, and it's a difficult balance to strike. However, interpreters must be involved from the outset on any kind of development of this sort of tool. And by conclusion, I'm sure Ramanas will be happy to hear those words, the digital evolution train is on its way. I almost said is in the margins. That's a revealing slip of the tongue, yes, I admit. So the digital train is on its way, and we have to take it, as we were saying yesterday, unless we want to get left behind. But technology can only be relevant if it's a source of added value. And at the same time, we'll have to master this technology. It has to be at the service of human beings, rather than human beings being forced to adapt to technology that's not really made for them. Because technology for technology's sake is not what I'd describe as progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antoinette, for this vivid and convincing story of the interpreter's encounter with the machines. Some important takeaways here. The machine interpreter is like an elephant in the China store, and we need technologies that can create added value for interpreters, but not created just for the sake of technologies. We will now swiftly move to a related field, that of meeting organization, where technologies are developing really fast. May I present to you the panelist from the European Parliament, Anna Grzybowska. Anna has made a big career leap since she joined the Parliament from the ranks of freelance interpreters back in 2003. From an interpreter to the head of the Polish unit, then the head of the programming, and finally safe landing in the sector of meeting and conference management. Anna was behind the modernization of this sector, as she was the project manager for the One-Stop Conference Organization initiative, the project that ultimately led to the creation of the Directorate for Conference Organization in the Parliament. This happened in February last year, and Anna has been in charge of this directorate ever since. The directorate manages meeting and conference bookings, conference equipment, conference coordination, and support. Among other things, it also has a unit in charge of technology watch and innovation, a bit like our task force, I imagine. So, Anna, what is your take on new technologies? Okay.
Thank you very much, and I would like also to start this brief presentation by thanking SCIC for the invitation. It's very exciting to be able to talk to you all. I would like to shift focus a little bit because we've heard a lot about what technology does in the area of language processing, interpretation, translation. But for me, from where I'm standing, interpretation in particular never happens in a vacuum. Interpretation happens in meetings, interpretation happens in conferences. And I would like to have a brief look about what's happening in this area and how this affects one of the very important conference services that we provide, which is, of course, interpretation. Many meetings and conferences, and this is the setup that we are most used to, are a little bit like this one. They take place in a room, in a particular city, in a particular country, with participants and speakers physically present in the same room. I would like, nevertheless, to acknowledge the participants that are listening to this conference via web streaming, because they're also there, but they cannot interact with us. And the technology that we use has now become familiar. There are presentations, there are maybe video messages, and there is, of course, the very important behind-the-scenes technical equipment that enables our interpreter colleagues to perform their work. But that is, in many meetings, in many conferences out there, there are changes happening. The capacity limitations are a constraint that meeting organizers don't like. They would like a bigger room. The bigger room is not always available. They would like more languages. There are only a number of booths in the room. They have to live with that. There are also environmental constraints, especially, unfortunately, in the recent past, security has been a consideration. So getting a large number of people to the same location is sometimes a problem, an issue. Air travel is a constraint, particularly for speakers. If they have to come from afar, they have to think about the time that they invest in traveling versus the time that they're allowed to speak in a conference. And for organizers, there's also a question of what is the event for and how is going to be, how's the outreach going to be, how's the return on the investment going to be if you only reach the limited audience that's present in the room and can interact in the meeting. And how do you know whether the people out there who are connected are paying attention, or whether they switched off, or whether they would like to ask questions and they can't. So the question is, what will the future bring, and what is going to be the conference of the future potentially? And certainly not all conferences will change. There's always going to be a need for face-to-face meetings. Antoinette talked about the context of negotiations. That's certainly one consideration. There's meetings that simply require the traditional format and that are going to stay with us. But there's going to be all those other meetings and conferences more and more. Hybrid events, so this is one of the definitions that I found for what is a hybrid event. It's a combination of an event such as this one, where we're meeting face-to-face, where we're seeing each other, interacting with each other, but there's also people interacting with the meeting from the outside. They're not only passive listeners, they also interact with the meeting. That's the big difference. And they interact in various ways. They can take part in live polls, they can vote, they can submit questions to speakers, and of course, they can also tweet, as certainly many of them do, but we would then know immediately in real time and be able to react to their tweets and social network feeds as well. And potentially speakers and not only participants but also speakers would interact with the meeting from several different locations, because they wouldn't be necessarily traveling to come to the meeting. So the advantages of such a format meeting would be that there'll be more lively, more memorable, reaching out to a much more numerous audience, because they would not be constrained by the space and by the room capacity. And they would reach a broader audience, and they will get the event more exposure and more impact. And that's for organizers is very important. Of course, new technologies in that way are a challenge for organizers. We were talking at the margins of the meetings about what happens in any meeting at all nowadays if there is a power failure. Well, if there is a power failure in a very technologically sophisticated meetings, then that's even worse. And of course, if you have more technologies in a meeting, you have more risks of that nature. IT, the stability of the network connections. How do you manage remote participants? How do you keep them involved in the meeting? And how do you keep us in the meeting room paying attention to remote participants? That's a completely different way of chairing, managing, moderating meetings that will have to be developed. And of course, and that's the question most relevant to this audience here, what about interpretation in those complicated meetings? How will it be perceived, and how will it be able to find its place in such a complicated setup? Will the organizers think that that's just an added layer of complexity and therefore best replaced by imperfect or perfect live captioning? That's one possibility. Will they think that it's an impossible challenge and therefore all decide that if a meeting is technologically complicated and hybrid, then it has to take place in English? Or will the service be able to adapt to those new setups and find replies to those challenges in due course? And this is a slightly provocative question at the end of my presentation. This would be, if we imagine this super interpreter that many of your universities are now training, that could be maybe a conversation that super interpreter in a few years' time would have with a potential client. That would be the question to the person. Would you accept, would you be able to interpret a participant who's only present in a meeting in a completely virtual, dematerialized form? Will you be able to do it? Will you do it? I leave you with that question.
Thank you very much, Anna. Obviously, these demanding and forward-looking customers see a lot of opportunities in the new technologies. Then they probably don't expect yet a machine interpreter as the first priority, but when it comes to more digital, more virtual meetings, hybrid events, these lively and memorable events, this is where they really expect some flexibility from the interpreters, and it eventually underpins our European democracy, of course, as well. So now we'll go back to DG SCIC and turn to our technology guru, Lode Deret. Lode is the head of unit for corporate audiovisual services and local IT infrastructure in DG SCIC. This unit takes care of the design, installation, and maintenance of meeting rooms in all European Commission. Lode joined the Commission in 1995 and straight to DG SCIC, where he stayed all his career, which we very appreciate. And he has a lot of experience in meeting organization, including remote interpretation events such as European Council meetings. So over to you, Lode.
Thank you. A few months ago, Javier came to me and said, can you do something for the SCIC-University Conference? So I said, I'll think about it and I'll come back to you a few weeks later and think what I could talk about. So first thing I want to say, I'm a fan of detective stories. So I'll show a little clip. So what I'm going to talk about, because it's about emotion detection. And the second thing is, I'm also part of a group that looks at AV installations for higher education. So a few months ago, I went to one of their meetings. I participated as one of the members to one of their meetings, and we talked about emotion detection and also how higher education is changing and how everything is changing for the same thing. There's a few things that I want to say. What I'm showing here is a gadget. So you have to look at it a bit like the little thing that you received from Javier to find your keys. This is not something we use today. This is something that was discussed during that meeting with higher education instances. And that's what we're looking at. So I don't expect it to tomorrow. It's not for next week. it's something we can think about for the future. And just to come back to a few things that the other people were saying, I totally agree that emotions are crucial. So that's why I thought about the emotion detection, because in the past, I've been working in SCIC a long time, so I hear a lot. So they say active listening is the key word that everybody uses. So active listening is not only listening of what's being said, but also the emotions, the actions, everything that people are doing. And that's why we're going to show a few things and see how it goes. So the first thing is from a series that's called Lie to Me. I don't know if people know it. It's about a guy that helps the Justice Department in finding people that are criminals and by looking at their faces. So yeah, go ahead.
Now, I call out this target is actually Lawton, and watch it again. Concealed scorn. One personal tip, you see this micro expression in your spouse's face, your marriage is coming to an end. Trust me. Yeah.
Don't these micro expressions vary depending on the person?
Let's leave this up and we'll go to the Cato Kalin footage from the OJ trial.
Mr. Kalin, you got a lot of money for your appearance on Current Affair, didn't you?
Yeah. Scorn. Scorn. Huge scorn. Shame, shame, and shame. Contempt. These expressions are universal. Emotion looks the same whether you're a suburban housewife or a suicide bomber. The truth is written on all our faces.
Thank you. Oh. So this is just to give an idea. I thought it was funny and I had to look a bit for it, but it took me some time. So now to go back to the real thing I want to show, because at the end I'm a gadget freak, so I want to show gadgets at the end. So I want to do it as quickly as possible.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
I did not email any...
You can close it. Really sorry about that. That wasn't meant to be there. So, emotion detection. So it's the voice and the emotion sometimes. Yes, on the next slide, please.
You have the remote.
I have the remote. So if you ever want to see the clip again, so this is where you can find it, and also at which minute you can find the little bit that I showed. So participating to a meeting. I put two pictures up. One is from a conference. Now, the thing to look at is that everybody's there with their computer. So, in fact, what's happening more and more, we see it here as well. When I came, let's say, 10 years ago to SCIC-University, there was nobody with a computer. If I look at now, it's maybe 1/3 look with a computer. This is from a university in America where they had a meeting of teachers and they all had their computer. So, at a certain moment, it becomes a bit different. The world is changing. The second one is actually the cabinet meeting of the Estonian cabinet. So why did I show this? Because I went to a meeting with the Estonian vice president a few weeks ago, and they said that from now on they do everything paperless. So in fact, they have to bring computers to meetings as well, and that they want to push even further that everything would be paperless for obvious reasons. So that's why more and more we have computers in the meeting rooms. Now, that's the front that you saw. If you look at it at the back, so if you see the different pictures, this is nothing, I didn't ask those people to do this. This is again from a university. So one of them is looking at a baby, another one is looking at something else. So people are not really paying attention the whole time. They're just doing things with their computer. So it's part of the whole experience of it happens already today. If people bring their newspaper, they read their newspaper in the meeting as well. It's not the computer that changes, it's just a natural thing of the people. So at the meeting I was with the universities, they said, how can we tackle this? Because for teachers, it's really annoying not to know if they are watching, if they are following things. How can we actually follow this? So they started to talk about emotion detection. So when you look at the technical blah about emotion detection, they come to 7 different profiles. So it goes from angry to neutral. And a lot of the applications that exist on the market today, they actually use those 7 different elements to show what's happening on the face. So that's the basic, that's the theory. If you want more theory, I put at the end of the presentation 3 links also to different applications that give you more information about that. So this is all the emotions. It goes disgust, fear. It's a bit what we show in the little clip. It's the same type of information. Now, what the universities were thinking of, this is actually not invented by me, but actually by a big university in Paris. They were thinking of using that emotion detection and putting a sort of tag on the heads of the students to show, is this one actually trying to follow the course, or is this one doing something else? I took out, in their presentation, because I took the slide or the picture from their presentation, they actually also had hearts, because they said maybe 2 students in the classroom fancy each other. So those things happen as well in universities. So this is how it could happen, that in a classroom that you see the actual emotions of the students, and you can say, this one is following, this one isn't following, even if you don't really see them looking at you, because most of the things are in the face of people, but here you don't see the faces anymore. So to give you an idea what it looks like and how you can use it, I put a few examples on it. So the first one is you take a picture and you can get the information of the picture. It's something you can do on Google as well, but this one was really good for me because he thought I was 35 years old. So I thought I have to put that one on because it's really good. And then I put the one on that you can actually download from the Google store. So if you sit somewhere, you can look at people's faces and you can get the emotion from the faces. And the last one is the one that we're going to showcase. As everything, it's a live demo, so it's something live. So I hope it works. So it's not, yeah, you can do the demo. So in fact, the demo is something you install on your PC, and it takes the live image, and it actually gives the. No, it's. Yeah, you have to show both. Yeah. So. I don't know where you have to change, probably. No. It's so we, as a live demo, as you can see, we have to.
He's analyzing me.
He's analyzing you for the moment, yes. So
we cannot see.
I don't know why we can't see it, but. For people that want to see it, as always, a live demo is a bit different. So if you want to see it, I'll leave it on. So people that want to see their emotions on the screen and see how good it works and all the rest. It actually gives this, there it is. Oh. Yeah.
Suspense.
Maybe close all the others. Yeah. So there you see the emotions on the right. The neutral, and you see each time the emotions. It becomes a bit.
I'm not.
So it gives an idea of what technology can bring. So it actually gives an extra input. That's what I was looking for when I said to Javier, I'm looking for something. I was looking for an extra input that can help interpreters to give a better job, better product. I hope this shows a bit what we can do. Like I said, it's a gadget, so you can use it yourself, but it's maybe one of the elements that have to be in the toolkit for interpreters to give them extra input. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorde, for presenting to us this fascinating story about the attempts to give the machines the power to read our faces and our minds. I already imagine myself sitting in front of a computer and getting some counseling and some emotional and psychological support if need be. Now we're quite good with time. I'm happy about that as well. And we have time for a few questions from the audience to all our panelists before we round up our panel. Yes, please.
Hello, good morning. Oscar Jimenez Serrano from the University of Granada, Spain, head of the Masters in Conference Interpreting there. Congratulations for this very interesting panel. However, when I read the title, Augmented Interpreter, I thought we would be speaking in the lines of translators' discussions on augmented translator. That means that after all these paradigm shifts in technology, we're trying to re-empower translators and therefore interpreters from this alienation that we have suffered from technology lately. And both the industry and the researchers, etc., are trying to find ways to re-empower them. Do you have any comments around that topic from the panel that I could hear? Because that would be interesting. And also, I think that the most interesting topic at the moment, at least in Spain, is remote conference interpreting. Everybody's speaking about that. There's nothing else in the interpreting circles than that. And so far, the attitudes I see from associations and institutions, etc., is a wait-and-see approach. Are we, or is anybody beyond that wait-and-see approach regarding remote conference interpreting? And finally, very quickly, it is not every day that a journal, a prestigious journal, is devoted to interpreting and technology. And Tradumatica in Spain has decided for the first time ever to devote this to translation, to interpreting instead of translation. I will be editing this issue out at the end of the year. So I'm inviting everyone to participate if they're interested on something related to interpreting and technology. It will be out by the end of the year. I'm visible in the Knowledge Center, so you can contact me there. Thank you very much.
Who would like to answer?
Yes. Only for the question, for the interpretation, I cannot answer, but only for the question of this extended translator. What I think is that l'évolution, je parle français, l'évolution en fait.
I think it's never just a linear development in this type of thing. What happens is that you have no technology, then you have a moment where the technology comes in, and then after that we understand how to integrate the technology into our professional life. I heard our colleague having on the one hand humans and on the other hand machines. But for me, it's not really like that. It's not quite so binary. It's more about how to integrate and understand technology to help us do our job. For example, in terms of translation, we understand that machines, and we have some applications that do this, better master figures than human beings because our brains are limited in terms of capacity and we can be distracted. So if you have an IT application that can check the figures a lot quicker and a lot better, why would a human being do that? So I think the biggest challenge really is to use technology to our advantage, and for that we need to have commitment. We can't wait for anybody else to do it for us. It's your commitment, my commitment, to understand that point and to really take ownership of the technology that can help us. But that's something that we all have to undertake together. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think I'll stop there. I really think it's all about integration and taking ownership of new technologies. That's the secret to the success here, I think.
Okay, good.
Juste un petit mot pour rebondir.
Just a brief word to take up what's been said as far as interpretation is concerned and taking ownership again. The way you've asked the question strikes me, because if you say retake ownership, it seems to suggest that the technology is there already, can be injected into our daily work. I myself was on a team to trial interpreter bank tool, which was put together by somebody from Mainz University, and during the tests we realized that the tool, which however was the cutting edge of technology, didn't really work yet when it came to meeting the expectations of our customers. I'll talk about latency, the way in which the tool can be adapted. If I use something in the booth, it has to meet my needs as I experience them in the moment. And we hear in the Parliament, it's possible to translate the minutes with 15 minutes delay. 50 minutes, okay, for translation, but interpretation, we need something which is immediate. And the first gesture has to be the right one. There's no fallback solution or safety net. So I'm happy to retake ownership of technology. I don't think that interpreters are hostile to technology. is rather a case where we, beyond using just paper and pen, but technology, and this is your job, I think, when it comes to research, and technology itself has to be at a level which means it's ready and can compete with other things.
To answer for us how we understand the augmented interpreter, maybe that was also the title. We are working in SCIC precisely to see how we can integrate technology in the booth to help the interpreters, the technology at the level the interpreters want, precisely what Antoinette said. This is, let's say, how we see the word, the idea of the augmented interpreter. And I want to say very briefly two things about remote interpreting. I suppose you know, I mean, Lode mentioned it too. We work already on in remote interpreting for the European Council meals, which means, you know, that let's say the heads of state are in one place and the interpreters in another. We work with the council, and at the same time, of course, we follow technologies. Maybe what you were alluding to were the platforms, but Florica mentioned them already yesterday, the internet-based platforms, cloud-based platforms that are used for conference interpreting. There, we know that there is a technology that is advancing. We are interested in it. We are going also to do some tests to see how it can operate in practice. We are following the discussions at the ISO about this tool. What is very important, and I think we should understand, is just at the technological level, what is very important is, I think, the quality of the network. It was alluded also at something that Andre said, the quality of the Wi-Fi at the meetings. So it is not simply, you know, let's say the interaction between the interpreter and the technology, but it is how technology overall around is there to support these new tools.
That's precisely it. So what do you think of the eventual creation of hubs, interpreting hubs to do remote conference interpreting? What do you think about that?
Thing I can say is that I know that it is one of the, let's say, one of the possibilities to use the system. We are not advanced there. There, we are really wait and see.
Just one element that came in two presentations, and that was sound quality. Mm-hmm. And I think sound quality is crucial for everything. So all the things that we're looking at is sound quality. In this room, I can assure you, the technicians look at sound quality constantly. We do a check every 6 months to see if the sound quality is okay, if the microphones are a certain type, if you move your head, but it's a certain... And I saw in the two presentations of the universities that they repeated that sound quality is crucial. Otherwise, the quality of what comes out goes down. And that's what we're trying to do. The thing that we have is we can do sound quality in our rooms, but we never manage the sound quality on the far end. So who manages the quality of the far end? And that's a bit what you said of the recording, of everything that happens. You don't manage the environment, you don't manage those things, and then the quality will go down enormously. Yeah.
Okay, Florica, I wanted to add a few things, and we must end this debate so that we could give some opportunities for others.
Werde ganz kurz sein, aber
I'll be very brief. I think the answers from all my colleagues have shown, indeed, that we take a holistic view of this. And I think that's what my colleague from DG Translation said too. We're looking at all the products that are out there very intensively. But as we look at them, we don't look just at do they work, but can they be used in a sensible way in our environment? And I think I was saying this yesterday already. We're a service for the institutions, and we have to perform a service properly. So just like DGT has looked at some high-performing systems and created some of their own, which you couldn't find out there on the market, well, we need to do the same thing ourselves. In all these areas, we know that there are all these systems out there, and that's a great thing. But we have to find what is important even for us, and they have to meet our needs, which means also the needs of our interpreters. We have to adapt them to meet those needs. So we mustn't lose sight of the human aspect. But it doesn't mean it's humans and nothing else, but we have to build a system around the humans. And we think we can afford to do that because we have all this expertise in-house. Because we have huge systems behind us. Politicians want this of us. And sometimes we actually have the money for it, although that's a bit more difficult to always get the money. So there are many things which I presented yesterday which are part of a long-term strategy. But we have to start somewhere, and I think we're doing that now. It'll be step by step, but every time we have to see what's out there, but what's important for us. But I admit, as a Commission, as EU institutions, as we do this together, we always need to look what is right for us, given our political environment, given our needs, security, confidentiality, data protection, things that have been mentioned, complexity of the multilingual environment. Others don't have that problem. We have colleagues from UN, we're happy to see them, and we work very closely together with them. But their challenge is different again. We have a wide range of languages. We're very proud of our multilingualism. We'll maintain it. But the technological environment has to be adapted to that. When we've got something, then I'm sure it will be one of our strengths. Political strengths, too. But also it will mean that we're more technologically advanced than others. Just as DG Translation has put it, they're working directly with the member state administrations too, and that's the last step which we have to bear in mind. It's not just a question of us here, it's also a question of citizens that we want to get through to too. Our interpreters aren't just in the booths, they also are sent out into the field with commissioners to events where they engage directly with citizens, have to communicate with citizens. So we have to adapt to our needs, and that will be a step-by-step process.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. We already have speakers who expressed their wishes. Please, not the delegates, sorry.
Morven Beaton-Tomey from the University of Applied Sciences in Cologne. I have a question. I think that Antoinette summed up many of the things I was thinking when I was listening to the presentations at the beginning. But my specific question would be towards Professor Boyer. Yeah? You said that at the moment you've been looking at segments and looking at error rate in segments. And you're wanting in the next step to look at textual features. What would those be? Are you going to be looking at things like cohesion, coherence, pragmatic markers, discoursal markers? What exactly would you be looking at? Because these are the things where I think the human, in terms in terms of a speech or an intervention, a human has the advantage still over machine translation systems.
Thank you for the question. So I'm coming from the department which has the worldwide reputation for like marrying linguists with computer scientists, and I'm from the computer science part. So I have many linguist colleagues who know the detailed definitions of all these discourse effects or this discourse phenomena that you have mentioned. We have spent decades really in putting linguistics into the systems. That was my thesis with the statistical, the pre-neural machine translation systems. And in the end, after some serious technical tricks, yes, I was able to gain translation quality with the help of the deep syntactic analysis, and that was still within the sentence level. And then neural networks came, and so far we are waiting for the linguistics to be useful again. So I'm curious whether what will actually win for the document level. At the sentence level, now you don't need any linguistic analysis of the input to get the state-of-the-art translation quality. So neural networks simply learn the syntax. We have papers on that. They learn the syntax like for free. And you don't need to pre-analyze that. As you probably know, the higher you go, the more abstract levels you reach in the linguistic analysis, the lower the agreement among linguists is. Like what phenomena were there expressed in the previous sentences, what types of links, the agreement simply, even among humans, simply shrinks. And there is a big risk that the generalizations that linguists would give us for the discourse level would not be precise enough and would not be interesting and unobservable to the machines as well. So I think that at the discourse level, the situation is indeed risky, and the linguistic analysis may be useless and may remain useless. But we keep trying. We are still the department who is not sacking linguists. We keep them. We want their expertise, but. So definitely they will be preparing test sets for us, but in terms of preparing, like pre-analyzing the data and putting the phenomena in, I don't think that will bring much improvement in the next few years. Where I see the improvement coming from would be better machine learning methods. So changing the learning algorithms so that they are capable to find I call it like weak or sparse signal. It's only so there is a saying that you have if one picture is worth 1,000 of words, and there is sentences where the previous sentence is equally important. But my saying to this is that unfortunately this is only in one of 1,000 sentences. So for most of the sentences, surprisingly, you don't need the discourse context in practice. It depends, obviously. It depends on the particular setting. But if you, yes, this is my experience from the news, translating news articles. So there is surely different types of discourses, and spoken discourse is definitely one of those. Yeah. But it can happen that surprisingly little context is necessary to reach some like average performance. To reach the human level performance, you obviously need to follow all the details. The problem is that on average, like an average performing technology can be already sufficient in practice. So that's like the general issue. As soon as the customers are happy to use halfway performing tools, then the profession is doomed. So we need to educate our customers. You need to educate everybody that they should demand high quality. If people stop demanding high quality of content, then the technology will replace us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Andrzej. Unfortunately, we must stop here because our time is up, but I'm sure you'll have a lot of opportunities to continue the discussions during the coffee break. I want to thank you very much to all the panelists and all the delegates, the audience, for your active participation and contribution to this discussion. I hope that we made yet another little step at adapting to this new environment, and we'll take home some useful insights. And surely I can say so, a big hope that we'll be in charge of the machines and not the other way around, especially in the linguistic professions. Come what may, as Florica said, it is our common duty to manage this process. And as Christina said, ignoring it is not an option. So let's make the best of it. Javier?
I don't have anything to add. Just let's go for a coffee and see you in half an hour time, a little bit less. Chers collègues, on va recommencer.
Well, colleagues, let's resume our work now. This is the final session of the conference. I think from the organisational point of view, we're very happy with how things have gone so far, and I think that will continue now with the final session, discussion with the universities, for the universities, and moderated by the universities. So our colleague Maria Chiara Russo has kindly accepted the role of moderator for this discussion. And as we really want to take advantage of the remaining time, I'm going to hand over straight to her now. Well, thank you. I'll speak Italian. First of all, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And I must say, thank you very, very much to SCIC and the Director General of SCIC, Florica Fink-Hoyer. And thank you also to the directors of the various services, Javier, Philippe, and the others that I've had the pleasure of meeting this time and in previous years. I really would like to thank you very much, because this issue of the Interpreter 3.0 is an innovative concept that we have to, and I stress the word have to, introduce into our courses. It really is at the top of everybody's agenda. And I think all of the universities that are present here today know that. And thank you all very much for participating and answering the surveys that we sent out to you. It was quite detailed, I know. But as I was saying, we've seen from the majority of respondents that everybody really is interested in these changes that are on the way. I think everybody has acknowledged or started to think about changes to be implemented. Just a couple of brief comments on this survey, just to try and understand the trends that have emerged from the questionnaires, and then we'll move into the actual discussion itself. And we'll do this with 6 questions. Some of them will be yes or no questions, or they will be initially, and then we'll go into more detail about how we go about the actual implementation of these changes. So, from the questionnaires, Kathy was saying, Kathy Pearson, and thank you very much, Kathy, for the great work that's been done on the Knowledge Centre. But she was saying 80 universities were invited to respond and 32 actually responded. So in terms of the representativeness, that was quite good. When the initial pedagogical assistance activities were started 30 years ago, and how things have changed to date. But just on the Knowledge Centre, that is a tool, a platform where we can exchange information, and the information remains saved there, written up. So I can always go back and look again at those points and those discussions. And my hope is that this coming together will be beneficial to all of us. So just briefly, the 6 questions that we asked. One was whether your departments have introduced changes over time. Perhaps we can put them up on the slide. Actually, these are the 6 questions that were asked on the Knowledge Centre. The majority of respondents said that yes, these changes had been implemented, and that was done via new languages, being attentive to the market, for example, the retour, obviously new technologies, thanks also in part to cooperation with the SCIC and the virtual classes. I think one point that would be worthy of more attention here would be whether you keep together translation and interpretation or whether you separate out the 2 professions. In terms of the job opportunities, though, for our graduates, we see that actually both fields are quite necessary, whereas different universities have different ideas about this. Many departments have now opted for language-independent courses that are more methodological in nature, and that's also very innovative and I think worthy of further attention. And another thing that's also been noted is much more practice rather than theory or linguistics, perhaps. Then we asked ourselves, what are the motors for change? What is pushing us towards these changes? Obviously, top of the list, the market. 24 out of 32 respondents said that. Different requirements, different needs, interpreting needs on the market. The feedback of students and graduates also plays a role. And then legislative type aspects, the Bologna Protocol, I come from Bologna, by the way, has also been a push towards change for universities and interpreting schools. And certainly it has made interpreter training into a master's level course. And then something else that I noted was the positive influence of international organizations, so cooperation with international bodies and organizations, the EU, the UN. I've seen that many of us have experience in that field. And then also cooperation with the professional organizations, perhaps contact with SCIC, or also membership to certain bodies like the EMCI. This also, I think, had an influence on change. Then, what kind of research underpins these changes? We're obviously all universities and we're all committed, I think, to making progress in terms of knowledge in our fields. Many of you, many of us, do carry out research within our departments and with international support. But what's the main area for this research? Cognitive aspects? And obviously we're talking about master's level and PhD level for those departments that have these programs, research also at that level. Also a lot of research around the pedagogy of interpretation. And then also research stimulated by technology. And applied linguistics is also another area for research. So without a doubt, there is a lot of research underway. So there seems to be a tendency to implement changes, but all on evidence-based approaches. Then soft skills. Interpreter 3.0 is without a doubt different to those of us that trained as interpreters 25 years ago. I think the interpreter now also needs to have the ability to be an entrepreneur to a certain extent. They need to sell themselves. And in some cases, those skills are covered in the course themselves, other times on the margins of the course. But there certainly is an awareness of these additional soft skills. And ethics, of course, is something which is extremely important for all departments. What is an interpreter? What are the roles you play as an interpreter? What are the essential abilities that you need? What about confidentiality and neutrality? And what about the general ethics of the profession? All of these points, of course, are very much taken on board. And then also attention to student well-being. We have stress management courses, we have mindfulness courses. Public speaking courses, but also now a new tendency towards focusing on the students' well-being as well. So dealing with the more emotional side of things, because of course emotions do play a part in terms of the learning stage, but also afterwards in terms of the professional stage. And some courses also focus on other avenues for employment after the course, because I think we all acknowledge that the conference interpreting market cannot absorb all of our students and graduates. So obviously it's also important to bear in mind other avenues for employment. And some faculties and departments have different sub-courses within their own courses, for example, modules on legal interpretation, or they have initiatives to help strike up contacts with other potential employers, for example. They invite stakeholders perhaps to the course. And re-speaking, which is also very widespread for the media, but also for disabled people, people who are deaf, for example. So I think it's safe to say that our graduates have so many broad skills, flexibility, mental adaptability, language knowledge. And so actually, those transferable skills are very important for other fields of work, and our graduates are attractive across the board. So we wanted now to go into a bit more detail on all of these points. We're going to have an exchange of opinions, but it's very important now that we have the written record of what we come up with. So on the slides, we'll have the questions written up. We'll have about an hour's time, so perhaps we can take 10 minutes for each question. So first of all, we'll do a yes or no question, and then afterwards we'll go into the details. So the first one here. Have you all, first of all, downloaded the app to be able to vote?
To type slido.com, then you will go there and you have to introduce the code, which is M311, and immediately you will be directed to this question. Okay, so go ahead. You have the code also here in the accreditation, in your accreditation. So slido.com and then the code M311.
Siamo pronti per
Okay, so are we ready then to start with the first question? Oh, we've already responded 100%. No. Only 12 people apparently have responded. Okay, let's hang on then.
Allora, siamo arrivati a 44 per...
Okay, so 44 people have responded. Shall we wait till we get to 50? Certainly this is a good opportunity now to compare our ideas.
Siamo arrivati a 50.
Okay, we've reached 50. So, yes, there have been changes. So, which changes then, in that case, have you introduced in your department? So let's open up the floor to get some more detail about the changes.
So who wants to explain what changes that have been introduced in the curriculum? Yes, Sophie.
Hi, my name's Sophie Llewellyn-Smith from Manchester University. One of the biggest changes that we've made at Manchester is to introduce a post-exam teaching period. It's a one-year master's, because in the UK the interpreting master's courses only last 1 year, and the final exams tend to take place in the month of May. So if you have an 11-week semester in which the students start simultaneous and are then supposed to reach a level that might allow them to aspire to an accreditation test, is just not long enough to acquire the skills. So we have a 4-week post-exam period where we focus heavily on simultaneous and also on more real-life material. We work on simultaneous with text, and I think that's made a big difference to the ability of our graduates to join the labour market afterwards. That we've made other changes as well, but that's the one that I think is most interesting.
Solo al riguardo.
Sorry, if I could just come back to that point. The topic of this gap between the recent graduate who leaves university and then accreditation, that gap's always existed, and a lot of effort has been undertaken by the different services to try and bridge this gap. Now, I think this is perhaps one of the few initiatives of this type, this idea that we have to invest after as well. I don't know whether your courses are fee-paying or not, but we might have to think about money. But it's certainly a potential way of increasing accreditation test passes. And I think it's certainly something which is beneficial to everybody, to us, the universities, and to the services here in the EU.
We underwent a re-accreditation process in 2017, and one of the things that we did there was to introduce a new profile. We used to have an ABC profile or a ACCC profile, and we responded essentially to demand from the German private market to introduce a AB profile with added specialist competence. So it's a proper conference interpreting degree, but with one language both ways, both simultaneous and consecutive, and added competence in liaison interpreting in specialist context, in some specialist translation competence as well, because this was the profile that was very much coming from the market of someone with very strong B languages needing to work both ways. Yeah, so it's very different from the institutional needs, but that was something that was responding to the German private market.
Hola, buenos días. Soy Guiomar Estampa de la Facultad de Traducción de la
I'm from the University of Barcelona, Faculty of Translation. We started a new 2-year program. It's a master's level. It had always been a 1-year master's before. But in this 2-year master's course, we've added a new series of modules. One of those is professional seminars and mentoring. There are a number of courses there. We start that in the first semester with voice workshops. We have an expert voice coaching expert there that talks about breathing techniques, etc. And then we also give mentors to students so that they have a professional freelance mentor that works on the private market or in the institutions that kind of helps them through their final semester to help guide them a little bit in terms of the do's and don'ts of the profession when you're starting out, helps them also to prepare for the accreditation test. This is run on a voluntary basis. We also organize different events. We have virtual classes, but our mentors also come to give sessions to our students, workshops about meeting preparation, how to add a language that's useful in the EU market, techniques for B language. And then for students that only have 2 C languages and 1 A language, we've included them in the translation masters that we have, and we also cover public service interpreting and translation. We think that's a good idea as well, to try and look at the poor cousin, if you like, of interpreting, PSI, and to raise the profile as well. They're some of the new elements. We're still experimenting with some things, and I hope that next year we'll be able to give you much more precise information of the outcome of these changes. Any further experiences, Olga?
Good afternoon, Olga Igorova, Astrakhan State University, Caspian High School of Interpreting and Translation. I wouldn't say that these were major changes, but I think they were important in terms of answering the latest developments and changes in the profession. First of all, several years ago, we introduced a special course, Remote Interpreting, which means that all the classes are aimed at making students feel more comfortable working in the situation of remote interpreting. It includes virtual classes, telephone interpreting, all kinds of, because I guess it's something that they need to be prepared for. And the second thing is helping them understand the new nature of our profession, which can be multidisciplinary. We have courses in conference management explaining to them that they also need to, as you just mentioned, not just sell themselves, but also, since our school also has a unit which is called the University Translation Interpreting Center, and all our trainers are working there as interpreters or translators, we also involve students as volunteers, and they do not, of course, come and work directly in the booth, but they help us organize events, prepare for them, meet people, participants, etc. So that's an important thing also. And also we included courses which help them understand that if they don't get full-time interpreting jobs just after graduating, they will still can be successful in something else. For example, terminology. Of course, terminology is important also for interpreters, but if they can't be accredited just after graduation, they can, for example, start and work as interpreters for other organizations, or they can do translation, etc. So to help them understand that there are different areas possible to gain experience, I think these were the two important changes: new technologies and multidisciplinary character of our profession. Thank you.
Bene, grazie. Thank you. I'd like to move on to the next one. Do you think that your course meets the demands of the market? Let's stop there. Well, that's interesting. 70% yes. So we'd like to know why. How do you think you're meeting the market needs? And those who answered no, that's an appreciated sense of self-criticism. Why not? I think all of us would have liked to be able to answer partially or something like that. Not just say yes, no, but I think most would have clicked partially if it had been on offer. And I think this has got to do with the fact that universities can't change the curriculum overnight, whereas the market can well change that fast. What universities can do mostly is to sort of try and catch up afterwards. You can think ahead to a certain extent. What we've been doing in the University of Vienna in order to react to a major change on the market, we had to do things outside of a regular curriculum. So there's a course now for interpreters in Arabic, Farsi, Turkish, Albanian, languages like that, languages which have become particularly useful after major waves of refugees. And you can't sort of start straight away a new language department in your university structure. And that, of course, is the disadvantage we have of being embedded in a university. But I think by offering extra courses, which you have to pay for, of course, and often that is more expensive than a regular university course, you can help yourself that way. It's something we've often been criticized of. We're only ever lagging behind, keeping up with the wonderful developments. But the point is, you can't change a curriculum within one semester. I'm sure you all realize it takes much, much longer. And that's the difficulty we all have to deal with.
Ja. Wiedenmeier an die Universität.
University of Thessaloniki. First of all, I fully agree that a question between yes or no and answering yes or no would be the right answer. Partially yes, partially no. For us with Greek, which is a peripheral language, it would be very important for us to have stronger courses. We train our students according to what the EU would like to see. That is from C into A, but that's enough, because on the free market, that's not enough just to be able to translate out another language into your own. Certainly not on the free market. So it would be good to have a more differentiated approach which would be close to the market needs. So the answer is between yes and no. And the question is, what market are we talking about at the end of the day? Thank you.
Bonjour.
Can you hear me? Good afternoon. I'm from Yaoundé. I would like to share with you our experience of interpreter training, traditional kind of two-year course, as described, but recently we've been approached by the Ministry of Justice. They'd like us to provide training for a smaller group of interpreters, but who have a lot of work. That is, interpreters who don't have a diploma level, but who are very useful in courts. Now, amongst those people sent to us for training was a butcher. Somebody works as a butcher on a market, but who does understand 3 or 4 languages, and who appears before courts to allow people to lodge a complaint, for example. There was a problem, for example, where a field had been damaged by animals, and it was need to negotiate the farmer and those who suffered needed to interpret with the police. So how did the butcher end up there? Well, he was there to cut the meat, the animals which had been massacred. How was he paid? By his interpreter, in kind, by giving a cut of the meat, that's all. So what I'm saying is that in the margins of conventional traditional training, a 2-year course, 120 credits, we do have a group of individuals who just do not have the kind of profile you're looking for in major international conferences, but are very useful on the market. So, but does the course meet the demands of the market is the question. Well, some of the interpreters we train in the conventional system with the masters perhaps don't meet the demands of the market. But those who come from nowhere, who don't have the level, immediately respond to the demand of the market, because these are people already doing the job in the health sector, for example, before courts, and especially when it comes to managing land conflicts, land disputes. Amongst the surveyors who measure the land and so on. So could we come up with some kind of conventional training for them? I don't think so. You're talking about ad hoc training, which we're asked to design for maybe 3 months. I'd like to do 8 months, but they said, no, we can only pay for 3 months and that'll be enough. So that's been our experience in an African country, in Cameroon.
Grazie.
Il y avait quelqu'un par ici Ou on passe à la question suivante alors?
No one else? On to the next question, maybe.
Okay, I'm Cila Sabo, representing the University of Technology and Economics, Budapest. And going back to the original question, whether we meet the demands of the market, I would like to say that we introduced quite a few measures. For instance, we added a new course for our interpreters and translators entitled Entrepreneurial Skills, where we teach them how to produce invoices, how to set up a company, and we also organize meetings which are referred to as trainees meet professionals, where we invite the representatives of the market every month. And these also provide brilliant opportunities for our interpreter trainees to interpret them in different modes, consecutive, simultaneous, and liaison. And also we employ trainers who are practicing interpreters, and we provide them methodological training as to, in terms of tips in the classroom and all kinds of things. And we also have the mentoring scheme, which the colleague from Barcelona referred to, and we rely very heavily on the local associations. We have two associations of freelancers who come in to help us, and they also teach and help in these mentoring schemes. So I think we are fit for market. We also have a project, e-transfer, which actually we work together with the University of Wien, Univi, for translation, and the title of the e-transfer is the title of the project. This is the objective, to be as fit for market as possible. Thank you.
Poi passiamo alla prossima.
Should we move on to the next question? I don't have any other answers to that question before we move on. Any further contributions on? No, of course. The method is such that the answers are yes, no, and that might not always be appropriate.
Sì, buongiorno, mi chiamo Marie e sono
I'm a head interpreter at UN. Question which is perhaps not so relevant. What do students themselves, what do graduates think? Do they feel that a master's they have followed actually meets the market demand or not? I think it'd be interesting to know what students think.
Soy Carmen Toledano.
Carmen Toledano from La Laguna University in Spain. On that question, we do follow the professional career of students afterwards. We all know that it can take some time. And right now we are working on training to meet market needs. Now, obviously, the Spanish booth is a bit complicated because it doesn't have the same requirements institutionally as a private market, in particular regards languages. But we are working on supplementary training, professional context, and things like that.
Esperienza della nostra università.
Our own university's experiences, I'm a laureate Italian consortium of universities, which every year carries out a detailed public survey. You can look it up on the net, and that's one of the questions which is asked. What is the level of satisfaction for graduates regards finding work? Sometimes the answers can be rather surprising. 100% last year, 50% one year's cohort to the next. So it is important to get this data. 53% means a lot of people are answered with quite a different result. Therefore, you need some follow-up questions. The students are sent questionnaires and invited to answer questions. We have 32 people on our masters. So we have to, with our internal resources, find out why this is the case, so we know what to do for tomorrow. Some of the data is so surprising that it's difficult to understand what's behind it. Numbers and percentages aren't enough. I don't know if others have this system within their institutions of collecting this information, have some experience with it. Anyone else do that?
Buongiorno, Paola Scioli.
Paola Scioli from Milan University. We don't have results yet, but SCIC in Italy has been circulating to us as coordinated questionnaires to pass on to first and second year master's students to find out what their expectations were before they signed up for the course, and then afterwards how successful they've been on the labour market. So there will be some feedback in the near future on that. That's an SCIC Italy initiative.
Harry Dai from Shanghai International Studies University. I thought Marquis from UNOC asked a very pertinent question. I think we on the academic side are theorizing and trying to get imperfect data with respect to what the market needs and how our students are responding to the market. On the other hand, we do need the input from our graduates. There has never been an easy and cost-free systematic way of knowing that. Some of the universities in the US have maintained a good alum system, which you get a much better feedback than European university and then Chinese universities. So to answer that question, I don't think any one of us here has a ready answer. On the other hand, we've been thinking about this issue. And on the way to this conference, I talked to some of our faculties, and I think we need to do something in this respect. In our university, in our graduate school, our flagship conference interpreting program is doing well because it's a limited pool of talented students. After very strict training, they are prospective for the job market as well. And in the recent competitive examination for the UN, 2 of our graduates now passed the exam, are put on the roster, and that's 2 out of all total 8 in the entire world on this round of exam. However, we do have a bigger pool of graduating students who are also trained in interpreting and translation. And their job market is uncertain, to say the best. So I'm thinking of maybe organizing a seminar of inviting graduates of a 3 to 5 years experience back to school. Not asking them how the job market, this bland big question, because for them, they are good because they're already in the job. But I wanted to ask is what do they think the school training provided them with a useful skill, what they found lacking once they are in the job, so that maybe in our next round of curriculum change, we could introduce courses that will meet that needs of a changing and evolving market. And I thought that could be a useful thing to do. Thank you.
Senz'altro. La prossima.
So the next one. What's the room for change and improvement? Where do you envisage any room for further updating your curriculum to meet better the market needs? It depends on the kind of market, as was said, as to how you're going to answer. But assuming that we know what market we're going for, what else do we have to do in our courses to meet that demand?
Abbiamo questo. Quindi,
Okay, there we have it. And I'd like to open the floor. Now, hear from those who say there's nothing to be improved, and hear from those who see room for improvement, and let's hear some proposals from your experience as to how to do that.
Thank you. Cyril Joyce from the University of Leeds. Just wanted to make one comment with regards to this. Obviously, there's always things we're looking to improve, and this also relates to the last question in a way on market relevance. Obviously, we need market relevance, but I think sometimes we're losing sight here of the fact that we offer a master's degree. It is an academic qualification. Market relevance, yes, that's important, but on some level, as a postgraduate academic qualification, it's relevant to all markets and none. Now, our graduates get very good jobs. Some of them go into interpreting, some of them don't. They have huge transferable skills. Some of them go on to further research. There's lots of possibilities. It is an academic qualification. Now, that leads me on to this specific question, updating the curriculum. There's loads of things I'd like to do to make it more relevant to the market, but they are coming out of our university with an academic qualification, and there are certain constraints around that with regards to the assessment, the dates, how we put the programme together, that actually limit the possibilities of what we're able to do. So I guess my point is, this isn't pure professional training at most universities. It is an academic qualification, and I think we've got not to lose sight of that.
Maren Dingfelder-Storn von der Universität
University of Mainz-Germersheim. I'd like to agree fully with the previous speaker. The problem I see that we'd like to include an awful lot of things in our courses. We can't. We'd, at the end of the day, like to have graduates who can do consecutive and simultaneous translation, best A, B, C, C, so that they can work on the free market in Germany. But if they'd like to also work for the institutions and authorities, we'd like them also to be able to be qualified to do community interpreting. We'd like them to be able to interpret in courts. We'd like them to have soft skills. We'd like to have computer competences. So we'd like to be trained to be professionals. But I've only got 2 years to teach them all of this and have clear requirements as to what the weekly burden of work is that I can expect of them, how many classes I can oblige them to attend. So what I can change is relatively limited in scope. I can throw out certain things, but the important things, for instance, also to allow them to be able to pass the accreditation test. So these are all the criteria we have to meet. It's difficult to meet them all, and I come back to what the previous speaker. At the same time, they have to have an academic dimension, the scientific, linguistic aspect, which means my room for making improvements is, in practical terms, limited. I think you have to be quite clear about that because of the system in which we work, because of the requirements we have to meet, the general parameters of a university course, and what I can expect my students to do a week, because they have to do an awful lot then by themselves. And the more I require them to be present a number of hours a week at the university, then they have to do everything else at home and have too much in a week. So I've seen with some interest from the discussion that a lot of these extra competences are in extra courses, additional qualifications outside of a main course. But again, question, who is to pay for it? Who can afford to pay for it? Is the university going to support it? So those of us who continue to develop courses, we are bound by the general parameters of the university in which we have to work.
Maria Piotrowska, Jagiellonian University in Kraków, Poland. I fully agree with my predecessors about certain institutional and academic constraints that are imposed on the curricula, and also local and cultural specifics that have also important effect on what we do in academia. However, the system, university systems, also offer a lot of opportunities and possibilities. And I believe that one of such areas for modification, perhaps improvement and better implementation is the area of translation placement or internship. It is an obligatory curricular requirement in Polish universities. And there is some room at that sphere of critical analysis, self-reflection, and also learning professional and soft skills. So translation placement as a module in our curriculum is something that perhaps could offer more room for improvement and development. Another perhaps good practice that we have in my school is that we organize at various occasions and rather regularly roundtable discussions with the participation of market representatives like local translation industry, international companies or translation offices, our graduates, students and academic teachers to keep up with whatever happens on the market currently. So I'm sure that's a common practice or maybe a practice shared by many universities. And it gives us university teachers some room for implementing change, introducing some elements that enhance competences expected by the industry, and also gives students a feeling of relevance and usefulness of what they learn in academia. Thank you.
Claire? Thank you very much. Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said, really. I think that working in a university context provides both lots of advantages and lots of constraints. And we have to juggle with all of those to inject as much professional practice and experience for our students as possible by opening up the classroom to outside speakers, organizing mock conferences within the university. Well, a lot has been said, and I think we're all trying to do that. There's one point I would like to touch upon, it was mentioned by Leeds as well, and that is the importance for us as universities of research. It's less important to the employers, obviously. Of course, there's the aspect of a theoretical framework, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm thinking more of the need to provide for the succession within the universities, because most universities have a requirement that to have tenure or to run a master's, one needs to have a PhD. And there is a real issue there for interpreting programs, because it's actually quite difficult to encourage students of interpreting to go into research. And so that is an aspect which makes our program sometimes quite vulnerable and fragile if we don't have enough people who are ready to take over on the university's terms. I mean, we'll always find interpreters who will help out with courses, but really anchored within the university so that the programs can keep going and are protected in some way from budget cuts and other decisions that universities sometimes take ill-advisedly. So.
Giusto, esatto, anche questo.
Indeed. In that case, let's go on to the next question. What are the other interpreting techniques which are being taught in your schools alongside the simultaneous and consecutive about public speaking and other things?
Allora potremmo già sentire qualche esperienza.
Okay, could we perhaps already hear from you about some experience of what other types of interpreting are taught in your universities?
Risposto sì, ecco.
Some of you have said yes, so volunteers?
Wir haben uns bisher
in Heidelberg, so far we decided against introducing other techniques, for example, community interpreting, unlike many other universities. This is a decision. We shouldn't take things too broadly, but at the same time, as long as we don't have a clear definition of the market and we can't clearly assume that those who specialize in community interpreting can make a living out of it, then I don't wish to jump on this train myself straight away. So mixed feelings. On the one hand, yes, there is a trend in that direction. On the other hand, it's not really a recognized profession, as indeed not all interpreting is either. I'm interested and follow developments, but at the university we address our service, but we've decided against each time, deliberately.
A questo riguardo vorrei solamente...
Just in this connection, perhaps I could add something, and I think it's a concern that we all have. An experience in a master's course, that Danielle's one, I think, where there was a course for public service interpreting, but because the interpreters in this area are not very well recognised, remuneration levels are not very good, they also questioned whether they should then invest in training interpreters that are then not treated as well as they should be subsequently. So I think we all share this concern. I mean, even in the previous panel discussion, we were saying that the customer must demand technology that can produce quality. And I think quality is something that we all are striving towards. And here there's a bit of a dilemma. We want to train these types of interpreters because we have a responsibility for that, but then subsequently the market doesn't recognise them as they should. So I think this is an open issue still, very much. Any other contributions? Yes, Carmen?
Sí, nosotros obviamente.
Well, yes. In 1 year, obviously we only focus on conference interpreting, but what we do is that we give a seminar on public service interpreting, and the clear objective of that is to make them aware of the fact that it's a totally different mode of interpreting and that needs specific training for it. And having conference interpreting qualification does not mean that they're automatically prepared to work in a court or in a hospital, say. Because on many occasions, when you look at public services, students often think that's like the first step to get experience, but that's not actually the case. It's a very stressful situation. It's very different, and we make that very clear. It's a very different mode of interpreting. And obviously the objective of the seminar is not to train them for that. It's to quite the opposite, to show them that they need specific training for that. Well, I totally agree with what Christina's just said. This dilemma was something that we also experienced. We're aware of the fact that we have two very different disciplines here. But for us, perhaps we took the opposite view. We have this kind of straitjacket that the university imposes on us of the modules, the number of credits, and I had to justify what I was doing with a student with 3 C languages and how I could justify also training a student with 2 C languages. But thinking about all of that, we thought this small 15-credit module might fit in here. Our university also has a long tradition when it comes to public services. The other coordinator on this master's is also doing some very important work in a different group on public service interpreting specifically. So at the end of the day, we decided that, okay, we need to explain to our students that you can't just go to court to interpret because you've done a master's in conference interpreting. But at the same time, we thought that if we start now already to train these professionals well, then perhaps one day in public sector interpreting, we might also garner more recognition from the market. So it's not so that if we carry on in Spain like we are now, where we have people just on the street who speak languages carrying out this kind of public sector interpreting, we're never going to manage to raise the profile or raise the bar. So I think we'd all like to have perhaps separate masters for the separate disciplines. But in reality, particularly in Spain, it's very difficult to do with the resources that we have, limited resources that we have.
Prego.
Florika Griesner, Universität Graz.
University of Graz. I'd like to tell you about our experience. We've gone a different way. We have very specific conference interpreting masters for not many students, I have to say. And then we have a very broad training for community interpreting and translating, where we have all sorts of different modules, professionalism across the whole language range for a market which is coming into being, but which is not well structured yet and is still not a well-paid market. What we've seen, and we've been doing this for some years now, is that the training is going to be our own scientific academic activity. We like to offer in practice what we research into in the university. And that training over the years has meant that the recognition and indeed specifically the payment of community interpreters has improved on the regional and local marketing in Graz. So it's a two-way street, and I think you have to take that into consideration too.
Bene. Grazie.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on now to the final 2 questions. We've asked if you teach other so-called soft skills. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything there. The question really is, do you teach soft skills, and if so, which ones?
Il numero sopra. Sì. Abbiamo già visto questi corsi.
So we've already seen some of these professional skills type courses. We've seen specialist courses in specific areas, stress management, etc. Is there anything else that we've not covered yet that might be a source of inspiration for all of us, perhaps?
Allora io aprirei così il dibattito.
We could perhaps open up the floor. Any other experiences, any other soft skills that you'd like to mention?
Chi dice no?
Hello, I'm Julie Johnson from the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey. And one thing that we've been doing for the last 6-7 years is a standalone elective module in mindfulness for interpreters. So not a lecture here or there saying, yeah, you should pay attention to stress and here are a few tips, but actually outside of the normal required courses for the degrees, this is something that students can do, and it's a full half-semester course so that it's led by an experienced trainer, and it gives students the experience of this certain ways of being able to self-regulate their own attention and their own stress, and learn that they're not the victim of their stress, but actually that they have agency here, so that when they're in stressful situations or their attention is scattered in the booth or they're in exams or what have you, they're not feeling so much the victim of that, but because they have the experience, they know they can bring their attention back. They know that they can relate to their stress in a different way. And we have found that it's made a difference. And actually, over the course of these years, a couple of hundred students have taken these courses and found them very helpful.
Interessante.
That's very interesting. Thank you. When I was talking about the well-being of students, I was thinking very much about the Monterey course and the mindfulness module that you just mentioned. It's very specific. Any other contributions before we go on to the final question? No? Okay, then the final question. Do you think that your graduates fit the Interpreter 3.0 profile?
Oh.
Stavolta è l'audience a essere manicata.
Okay, I think it's the audience that's a bit split there, 58-42.
Allora sì, intanto possiamo cominciare.
Okay, well perhaps we can start asking ourselves why or why not.
Qualcuno rompe il ghiaccio?
Who's going to break the ice?
Olga.
I think it's also important to have the same kind of question for trainers. Do our trainers fit this profile or not?
Bonjour, je m'appelle Joseph Zessou, je représente l'université.
From the University of Ghana, Legon. Well, I answered no to this question because, first of all, we don't have the technology. We can't benefit from the technological advances that you have in Europe. We don't have it yet. And as the colleague said before, do the trainers themselves fit this profile to be able to train interpreters to fit the profile? And there, my answer is no as well. My trainers don't fit this profile. The tools don't allow me to fit this profile. And so there is a long road ahead, at least for those of us on the African continent anyway.
Oui, je voudrais juste rebondir.
Yes, perhaps I could just come back to what's been said. And I think when we talk about the Interpreter 3.0 profile, it's very important to think about this in a global way across the world, and we shouldn't focus on just one continent or forget others. It's, one world, one profession, the same profession, and I think it's very important to remember that.
Aspettiamo ancora giustissimo.
Okay. Helena Galvão from the University of Porto, Portugal. I just want to say something very simple, which is I would like to see a better definition of what an Interpreter 3.0 profile is before I can answer yes or no to this question. Thank you.
Quando abbiamo pensato...
Well... Oh, okay. Go ahead and then I'll answer.
Harry Dai from Shanghai International Studies University again. Very briefly, I'd like to share with you something in China which went viral at the beginning of this academic year. Soon after the new semester started, there's a open letter written by a new freshman in one of the universities in the interpreting translation department, writing to the university authority saying that she was duped to think there's a job market in the future. And she wanted to make sure that there's a market there, and she even demanded that maybe she should change major and or withdraw from the university and get back her tuition. So there was some debate went on afterwards. So I mentioned this in response to this particular issue. And I thought I agree with the previous speaker that this concept of Interpreter 3.0 is still being defined. Okay, so we are all part of this process of defining it. But in terms of whether our students are meeting this definition, or whether our trainers are meeting it, I would say in terms of the students, I think their job is really to acquire the basic interpreting skill first. I think if they have done that, I'm pretty sure that they would be meeting the 3.0 requirement sooner than the faculties, because after all, we are slower in adapting to the more electronic digital environment, but even in their basic training, they are already employing all the possible gadgets, devices, and they work very fast. However, I'm afraid that if we push this concept a little bit sooner in the classroom, then they may be misled to concentrate on something that's not the essential, because the essential is really still the interpreting skill, the master of the language, the acquired skill, and also accumulation of world knowledge. So this, I think, we should be very clear about our role as trainer. Thank you.
Allora dobbiamo chiudere. Allora,
Okay. We have to bring our discussion to a close now, but in terms of drawing a conclusion, when we thought about Interpreter 3.0 and this discussion and the structure of it, the idea was to be able to impart the basic skills, but also to use the tools and technologies at our disposal to help in that and to be aware of a changing market. So the idea really was to compare our experiences on that, because I think we're all subject to the same requirements really, and the impacts and constraints and restraints. Well, thank you all very, very much for your contributions. It's been very interesting. And also thank you for reminding us that it's just one world and one profession, and that we have to bear that in mind, and that our driving force should really be bringing quality interpretation across the whole of the world. Just one final thing. In order to have a written trace of what's been said here and on the Knowledge Centre, They will always be made available for you to turn to whenever you want to at a later stage. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Maria Chiara. I think mission accomplished. We've had a debate amongst universities, for the universities, by universities, and we're very happy to have had that. We're now nearing the end. Let's now move to the satisfactory inquiry. Since we've got Slido going, let's use this as we did last year. So stay on Slido. Use the same code, is that right? Yes? M311. And now you should see some questions about the conference. I think you can be sincere, critical. There's a need for that. If you want to flatter us, that's okay too. So tell us how you feel. The survey will remain open 2 or 3 days. You don't necessarily have to respond immediately. You can if you want to. The most interesting thing is that at the end, we'll ask you to put into one word what you think the conference has been for you. So if you already have an idea, we'd welcome that because it will be shown on the screen. But that's a process which we can leave open. So, having said that, I'll give the floor now to the Director General, who is the person who will have the final say about the conference and also point us towards the future. So over to you, Florica. You have the floor. Maybe we could just wait a bit and see if
whatever that means. Fantastic. Interesting. Sí. Perdón? Sí?
Yeah, sorry, just because we don't want you to be shy about filling in the evaluation. It's only this last slide where we see the results. So don't worry, you can be as critical as you like. We're not going to know who you are, and we're not going to show the results of the evaluation itself on the screen at all. Obviously, we will look at them and take them to heart afterwards, but don't be shy. It's just this slide that we'll see. Sorry, Javier, I just wanted to make that clear.
You did it very well. Y otra cosa que les quiero decir.
Another thing I wanted to say, as you know, we've got this afternoon the editathon. If you're interested, it'll be in my room next door. Room 5. As of 2:30, please come. We'll be able to have lunch together when we're finished here. And if you haven't signed up for the editathon, you still can come if you want to. And a final thing, take everything with you when we finish, because they're going to close the room. It belongs to DG Com, and we're going to have to clean it, so we can't leave things in here afterwards. That's the only thing. Now, informative is the word which is coming up most often. That's not so bad. In which case, I think over to you, Florica. Thank you, Javier. I think we can continue with this, but I would like to say a few final words now, because the event is now nearing an end, and I do hope that the choice of subject, even if you're sceptical to begin with, and the presentation we heard today and yesterday have interested you and you've found them enriching. We wanted to offer you a conference which is firmly anchored in the here and now today, which nonetheless looks ahead to the future, which has started already, and which places interpreters as people and human beings at the center of things. That's how we wanted to have a conference. And over 2 days, I think you've seen about a lot is happening outside of SCIC, but also inside SCIC. Kathy, for example, explained to us about the Knowledge Centre, the purpose of which, after all, is to bring together a whole community to share all this information. And Philippe was saying that just now. It's not a question of just keeping it to ourselves, but to sharing it with others. That's the idea behind the Knowledge Centre. It's now up and running. It's been taken up and used. And we have 2.0, and I hope we'll be moving towards a multilingual version 3.0 later this year. We've also seen, and we started to talk about this, that our cooperation with Universities is something that we are reworking to make it more compatible with our needs, but also with what you can offer. We're proud of the system we've built up over the years from our predecessors, and which our colleagues are involved in on a daily basis with you. This cooperation, I believe, means that we get interpreters who meet our quality requirements, and this system of cooperation with universities is something we're very proud of, and we'd like it to be able to be future-proof and to continue to serve, and we can do that with your help, which is why we welcomed this exchange. As Philippe was saying yesterday, the trend is there. There's an increasing demand for qualified interpreters. So as part of a cooperation, it's worth continuing and making it more intensive. We've heard a lot of interesting presentations about the question as to what the interpreter of the future will look like. We had a very justified question just now, well, how are we going to define Interpreter 3.0? We don't have that ourselves. Actually, it's something which is a bit of a moving target, the image of a profession. What I was trying to say yesterday, and I think my colleagues have echoed that, Antoine in particular this morning, and we've seen some of this just now. The basic requirements, skills of an interpreter are not going to change. We continue to need that. And the basis is proper interpreter training. What we've been talking about is, do we need to add something to this? Digital skills, soft skills, do we need to invest in those in addition so that we have an even more rounded, more resilient image of a profession? That's the question. But to be quite honest, in the European Union, we do need this kind of forward-looking interpreter, because we want to offer to our citizens and to our politicians, be it in the council or MEPs, something at the right level. And we want to be able to support them so they can communicate directly with each other in a multilingual setting. Now, you've been actively involved today in the universities. You continue to do that. We hope that the Knowledge Centre, that's very important. Everybody has to be able to benefit from the knowledge that you put up there in the Knowledge Centre, so that interpreters are well prepared for the future. I'd like to thank you all for attending, and especially those who've participated actively today. I'd like to thank the guest speakers who are not just next to me now, but also seated around the room. It's thanks to your presentations that I think we managed to have a very interesting and interactive discussion. Of course, all conference only is good as the people who attended. We've had a great attendance and great speakers, so thank you very much for that. We've had some very good moderators too, today and yesterday, from all sides. And of course, I can't close without thanking others who've been working behind the scenes, a good many people from our team. First of all, the colleagues who are working with Javier, but also colleagues working with Pat Lambert, who've been managing the conferences. making sure that we have this wonderful environment. Also the technical people who are sitting back there, making sure that everything's been going smoothly. All our colleagues in the teams are responsible for the rooms and equipment. Lodarat gave you a little bit of an appetizer for what they can do. And of course the interpreters sitting in the booths, because otherwise we won't be able to speak to each other. And most people wouldn't have understood everything otherwise. So we still have a need for them.
Bin noch nicht ganz fertig.
Not quite finished yet. I know lunch is waiting for us, but I would like to close the conference without, again, congratulating our 4, even if only 3 are present, prize winners. We were delighted to listen to you. You have inspired us. You have shown us that it's worth to invest in the new generation of interpreters who are enthusiastic and motivated and ready to take up a profession with joy. And I think that is something which helps to motivate all of us. I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I wish all 4 of you, including the lady perhaps who's listening in remotely, all the best for your personal and professional futures, and wish you every success. And let's not forget the motto, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. I think together we have to prepare for this new future. I hope you can look to the future now with more confidence after this conference, realizing you're not by yourselves, we're doing this together. We in the SCIC want to do this. We have an open mind. We want to be prepared. You never know what's going to be hitting you. But insofar as possible, we'd like to be prepared for the future. And for that reason, we feel confident as we look to the future. We have a strategy and a clear vision for it. And with that in mind, I'd like to wish you a safe and pleasant return trip, a good weekend, and of course we can continue our discussions over lunch. Thank you.
And just as a souvenir, I think that we have something to show you just before we left the room. So we are having lunch now together, just where we had coffee before.